Ancient Egyptian tombs inside the Grand Canyon? That's what an explorer found right before the government closed the area off from the public. Way back in 1909, the Arizona Gazette reported a story of a miner, G.E. Kincaid, looking for gold in the Grand Canyon. While journeying down the river, he came across what looked like steps carved into the canyon side, so he decides to check it out. The steps, he claimed, were perfectly carved, not a natural formation, and as he approached the top, he came across a man-made cave entrance, which do exist all around the Grand Canyon, but this one was different. He went inside, turned on his light, and saw tunnels chiseled with perfect architecture and more branching paths deeper inside. He kept going until he comes across an enormous room several hundred feet long. In the middle stood a giant statue of what looked like Buddha, holding lotus flowers in each hand. Now, Buddha has nothing to do with ancient Egypt, which actually makes this more of a mind trip, but we're getting there, I promise. This looks like it was an ancient underground city, which actually exists all around the world in places like Derinkuyu in Turkey. Kincaid was amped. This gotta be the discovery of the century, so of course he leaves and asks for funding to explore more from the Smithsonian, the world-leading museum research and education institute, the gatekeeper of archaeological findings, made by the US government, who gladly agree. They send a team of scientists and miners led by S.A. Jordan to fully excavate this mind-blowing discovery. With this team backing the expedition, Kincaid goes back to the caves and realized he barely scratched the surface. He left extremely detailed journal entries describing the whole excavation, with hallways up to 12 feet wide and large oval doorways throughout the underground complex. During this excavation, they find full-size rooms which appear to have been made for dining, winding halls with detailed architecture, and artifacts like pottery, urns, and to their surprise, copper tools and swords, along with rooms built for metalwork. All signs of an ancient civilization far more advanced than what should have been here at the time. But then they find this: Egyptian hieroglyphs carved and painted on the walls, and stone tablets with similar hieroglyphs engraved. And then finally, what appeared to be a crypt, filled with little cubby holes in the walls, each containing mummies of giant humanoids, some even being reported as reptilian looking. Yeah, Egyptian tombs in the Grand Canyon. They call this complex the Citadel, and by the end of their expedition, hundreds of rooms were discovered, estimated to house up to 50,000 people. They determined that, of course, this must be the remains of an advanced civilization that were here before the natives, and somehow brought the knowledge of the ancient Egyptians from the other side of the world into the Americas. G.E. Kincaid and S.A. Jordan presented their Egyptian hypothesis to the Smithsonian, who obviously did not like the sound of that and denied further excavation. Egyptian hieroglyphs spotted outside of Egypt? Absolute nonsense, right? Maybe, but this isn't the only time that such a claim was made, like the Gosford hieroglyphs carved into rock in Australia, which look almost identical to that of the Egyptians. It's hard to tell exactly how old they are, but of course they're labeled a hoax. Someone else carved them here a few years ago to trick the world. Or the written language of the Mi'kmaq, a Native American tribe that lived along the Atlantic coast, which shares a baffling number of similarities with Egyptian hieroglyphs, two cultures that allegedly had no contact among each other. This one was just a coincidence, of course, just like the Fuente Magna bowl found in Bolivia with Proto-Sumerian cuneiform script writing on it. That's ancient Mesopotamian writing uncovered in South America. So artifacts of ancient Middle Eastern civilizations found in the Americas have happened, but we just ignore them. To this day, the Smithsonian denies this expedition in the Grand Canyon ever happened. And the stories of the explorers are of course deemed a hoax. So is any of this real? The native indigenous people seem to think so. Native American tribes like the Navajo, Zuni, Acoma Pueblo have legends of a race that existed there before them, even citing the Grand Canyon specifically as the place where the first people emerged from. These myths all speak of either a race of reptilians, yes, we're in lizard people territory now, or giants that civilized the area, building underground cities to protect themselves. The Hopi tribe even have a story about a sky god who, after a series of cataclysms, emerged from a moving star and took the tribe to underground caves in the Grand Canyon region to protect them. The Havasupai people believe the canyon is the home of the Supai, the spirit of their ancestors. The Paiute culture got the legend of the Havmusubs, who also lived in an underground city and had silver tubes that shot lightning that could end a man's life, and silver canoes in the sky, which all line up perfectly with the flood myths, not to mention UFO sightings, around the world where godlike beings descend from the sky and gift civilization to humanity. And is exactly why the Smithsonian cringes at the thought of admitting to this, because it would imply that cultures like the ancient Egyptians had overseas contact with the Americas, completely destroying their current narrative of isolationism, which states that groups of humans evolved independently of each other all around the world. Today, this section of the Grand Canyon has some interesting official names for the formations found here, like the Tower of Set, Horus, Isis Temple, Ra, the Cheops Pyramid. All Egyptian names, and these formations have the weirdest, most interesting shapes, unlike those found in any other canyon. Alright, enough yapping. Where is this cave, and can't we just go to it today to prove this once and for all? Really thought it was that easy, huh? The exact area where the Citadel would be found has, of course, been marked off limits by the government. The Grand Canyon has hundreds of man-made caves all over it that are confirmed real, with only 30 that have been officially mapped out, some of which are sealed with steel gates for safety. When amateur explorers explorers tried checking out the region, planes and helicopters would appear out of nowhere over areas designated as no-fly zones, some claiming they can even spot remnants of pyramids and other ancient structures in the cliffs of the canyon, implying the Grand Canyon may actually be the site of a bustling ancient city. Rumors of ancient Egyptian remains in underground cities in the Grand Canyon, government closes the area off, and then planes and drones are found scouting the area. Are they hiding something from us, or am I just gonna get stitched into another Mr. Know-It-All debunking video?
If you didn't know, the Grand Canyon was actually used to mine gold.
I did know that.
What's interesting is that the Grand Canyon had so much gold, it could have crashed the entire gold market. And did you know that 90% of the caves in the Grand Canyon are unexplored by the public and are protected by the US military? Now, when I tell you why, it's gonna get a little interesting. This guy, he was exploring this one cave. He found ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, other types of artifacts, mummies.
What?
Now they discredit this guy, and then some other credible guy came in and found the same thing. Below the surface, people believe this is where the lost city of gold was actually at. Every president has tried to mine gold at the canyon, but was denied. I believe that the US military found something down there. Could be the lost city of gold, could not be, but they found something. To keep watch of it means that there's something valuable there. It will make sense that if the Grand Canyon had so much gold, it would not be as valuable, that something like that could be there.
Just let it slip a little bit. Why is 90% of the Grand Canyon off limits? Well, they'll tell you it's for ecological reasons. Wrong, because the U.S. military is literally on the rim drilled into certain caverns that they identify through all their technical abilities and extracted giant mummies. There's a legend that Mark Antony and Cleopatra, when they knew they were in big trouble with Rome, they sent their son Alexander Helios to the west with 50,000 of their most trusted servants, scientists, etc. And for the record, they absolutely knew how to circumnavigate the globe. The idea of isolationism was pretty much the foundation of the Smithsonian by John Wesley Powell. So in other words, it was important for the idea that nobody traveled any place to keep the false narrative going, because there's even evidence of the Chinese in the Grand Canyon and some of the caves, statues of Buddha, for instance.
Now Forbidden History Revealed by Steve Quayle really talks about this man, John Wesley Powell, his comings, his goings. He operated on a premise. And his premise was that there is a certain historical narrative that we want to preserve for the Americas, and any other historical narrative we're going to hide away as quickly as we possibly can. Now, to say that is one thing. To see this is another thing indeed. Because when I watched your production, it suddenly became real. At the visceral level, this whole thing, and I said to myself, I now understand for the first time how all of the conspiratorial ideas that the world has had are locked together into one idea, and that is to hide biblical truth.
That is the conspiracy.
That's the bottom line.
And the word I was given by the people that fight the things that go bump in the night is that, remember, it's never what you see on the surface, but what's underneath. And so when we're talking about the history of the Grand Canyon, now this is what else is interesting, Gary. The giant mummies were taken to Area 51. And it's fascinating that Area 51 has gotten the, what would you say, the fame it has.
So were they taken there in a flying saucer?
Yes.
I just have to ask.
Yeah.
But no, I'm kidding. But I guess we need to laugh a little bit, because this is such a bizarre and dark motif. You almost have to just take a deep breath and look away once you begin to realize how we have been manipulated.
Well, and it's a matrix of manipulation, okay? It's like, imagine a giant tapestry where every thread is evil, where every thread is designed to deceive, to destroy, and then weave it all together, and I think you've got the end times. Now, again, the reason that this is so important, because in this DVD, I go into the eyewitness testimonies of the genetic altering and genetic engineering labs using giant DNA and basically creating hybrids and creatures. If you remember this, that even the rumors of the golden age of Atlantis and Hyperborea, Ultima Thule, Shangri-La, all of the, if you will, legendary mystical places, they even have in their oral tradition, or at least the legends about them, that they were destroyed by the gods, plural, when they got into genetic engineering. And that's interesting because we're talking about a long time ago.
And we all remember the story in the Bible where Moses and Aaron go before Pharaoh. And Moses has the rod, the famous rod, and he throws it down before the Pharaoh in order to demonstrate the power of God. It turns into a serpent, basically putting the finger in Pharaoh's face. This is what you are. You're a serpent. And what happens? Pharaoh calls the wise men, the sorcerers, the magicians of Egypt, and they did in like manner with their enchantments. In other words, they threw down rods that turned into serpents as well. And so right here in Scripture, you have to believe it. If you believe Scripture, that it is possible to transmute an object that is not living into a living being through occult power. And my Bible says it, I believe it, and Moses confronted this power. Now that power, you're saying, has extended all